who would you trust more? A theologian speaking about heaven, or a neurosurgeon who once didn't believe in the soul, but was the very man who died and came back from the other side? In this video, you will hear the first-hand account of Dr. Eben Alexander, a man who fell into a coma for 7 days and returned with memories that no one in the medical world could explain. You will step into a place where time doesn't exist, where light speaks through emotion, and where a woman he had never met sent him a message that changed his entire life. And especially in the middle of this video, we will explore something very few dare to accept: that human consciousness might exist beyond the brain. You're listening to a story from Heaven's Thread, a place where the secrets of the soul, death, and rebirth are told straight from the heart. If by the end of this video you feel something stir deep within you, leave a comment with the letter Q as a sign that you've returned to the great question. But if you feel this story could go even deeper, leave a comment with the letter E so I know and can do better for you in the next video. Are you ready? Now, close your eyes for just 1 second and imagine you wake up in a place where there is no fear, no memory, but something you've never fully felt in this life. Love, unconditional, without reason. That's where Eben Alexander went. And now, he wants to tell you everything. 700 AM, November 10, 2008. Eben Alexander, a world-renowned neurosurgeon with over 25 years of experience, collapsed in his bathroom. No warning signs, no accident, just a sudden, violent headache, and then blackness. When his wife found him, Eben was unconscious, and just hours later, he slipped into a deep coma. Doctors diagnosed it as acute bacterial meningitis, an especially lethal form that attacks the outer layers of the brain, the cortex. That's when the paradox began to unfold. The cortex, the part of the brain responsible for thought, emotion, and memory, was completely shut down. So the question is, if the brain was off, who was dreaming of heaven? Eben lay motionless in the ICU. Machines beeped steadily, as if clinging to a life now only held by wires and numbers. The doctors, his own colleagues, agreed. His chance of survival was almost zero. His wife, Holly, held his hand and whispered, "If you can hear me, fight, Eben." But inside him, there was nothing but darkness. No images, no memories, no me. Later, Eben would say, "I had no idea who I was. No language, no emotion, only a presence, a thick, mud-like darkness, a space without direction, a time that didn't exist. And yet, the strangest thing was, I wasn't afraid. Why would a man who had opened hundreds of brains feel at peace with no mind? And then, the first sound, not a voice, not a word, just a deep, whooshing hum, and then light. How could light pierce a place where consciousness had clinically died? Who entered with Eben at that moment? And why? Later, did he declare with certainty, "I lived in that world, and it was more real than this one. No more light, no more body, nothing left to remind him that he had once been a man named Eben Alexander." The only thing that remained was consciousness, floating in a space like thick, Murky mud, a void with no sense of time. Eben called it the realm of the earthworm's eye view, a world seen only through the eyes of a creature with no brain. Strangely, he wasn't afraid. He didn't know who he was, didn't know where he was. He heard no voices, saw no images, but there was something strange, a sense of being not as in I am Eben, but more like I am, something that still exists. So the question arose, can the soul be aware without a brain? Then something happened. In the midst of that thick, stagnant space, he began to hear sound, not human voices, not language, but a series of tones, like the beat of distant drums, echoing, stretching out, like the breath of the universe. Eben said, that sound didn't come from outside. It came from within the very space I was merging into. As the sound intensified, something began to crack open in that formless realm. A swirl of bluish-white light began to spin like the slow rotation of a giant wing. And suddenly, Eben felt himself rising, not flying, but being drawn upward, weightless, pulled out of the muddy field of consciousness. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew for certain that place was not death. How could a neurosurgeon, a man who believed all consciousness was the product of the brain, feel movement, hear sound, and sense presence, while his brain was entirely shut down? What Eben didn't yet know was, on the other side of that dim light, a soul was waiting for him. A soul that, when he realized who it was, his entire life would collapse so that it could begin again. Eben was no longer in the darkness. At first, he only felt a gentle motion, as if being drawn through a tunnel made of blurred, radiant light. But then everything opened up. No more mud, no more shadows. Instead, there was a vast sky, blanketed with white clouds like cotton candy, drifting slowly across a sapphire blue expanse. Below, a field, golden, shimmering, as if millions of petals were dancing in a soft breeze. There was no sun, yet everything glowed. Not blinding, just perfectly warm. Eben said he could hear music, but it wasn't coming from anywhere. The sound arose inside his mind, harmonies so delicate, it was as if light itself could sing. And then he saw her, a woman riding atop a giant butterfly. She said nothing, used no words. She simply looked at him and smiled. A smile so tender. He forgot entirely where he was. She had long, honey-brown hair that fell to her back, and eyes as blue and sparkling as Lake Michigan in midsummer. She wore a simple dress, blue and white, flowing gently in the wind. And in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty, though he had never met her in life, she loved him, unconditionally. She extended her hand, not to touch, but as a gesture, and from that gesture, a message resonated within him. You are loved. You are eternally safe. Nothing you have done can diminish that love. Eben didn't hear a voice, but he understood completely, through a language with no words, but deeper than language itself. What he didn't yet know was that later, when he awoke, he would be shown a photograph of someone who had died long ago, and it was her, the woman on the butterfly, someone who had never met him in life, but appeared as he crossed the threshold of death. The heaven Eben saw had no golden gates, no radiant thrones, no familiar hymns like the ones he'd heard in church as a child. And yet, it was so breathtaking, he forgot to breathe. The sky had no beginning, no end. The light didn't shine from a particular sun. It seemed to emanate from everything, from the grass, from the petals, from every molecule in the air. Each color he saw had its own sound, and each sound carried an emotion so profound he could only cry without knowing why. In that place, there was no time, no ticking clocks, no morning or evening. Every moment unfolded all at once, but without chaos. Eben felt each emotion, not as an observer, but as a soul returning to its source. There were other beings there, not humans, not animals, just streams of consciousness, moving like wind, glowing softly, and overflowing with love. They didn't need to speak. They simply existed, and you knew who they were, even if you had never met them in this lifetime. Eben no longer felt like a doctor, no longer a father, a husband, or a patient. He was nothing but pure awareness, held in an invisible embrace that could be felt, like sunlight touching your cheek on a spring morning. He said, "If I had to choose between this world and all the material glory I ever possessed, I would choose that realm, because there I knew who I was without needing a name." So, if you've ever dreamed of heaven, maybe the question isn't whether it exists, but rather, how deeply has your soul remembered it? No one wants to leave that place. No one, after tasting absolute warmth, would ever choose to return to the cold sterility of medicine and the imperfections of the body. But Eben didn't get to choose. He felt a shift, a gentle pull, as if being drawn through a thin veil, not painful, but sorrowful. Sorrowful because he knew he was about to leave that place of pure love. The girl on the butterfly didn't say goodbye. She simply looked at him one last time, her smile still as soft as the morning light over the Blue Ridge Mountains. And then it all began to fade. The light dimmed. The music vanished. The vastness collapsed into a single point and disappeared. Eben opened his eyes, 7 days in a coma, and he woke up on the 8th morning to the stunned disbelief of the entire medical team. When he blinked for the first time, they thought it was just a reflex, but then he moved a finger. He began to groan softly, and after that, spoke his first words. But something was strange. Eben couldn't remember his son's name, didn't remember his wife, didn't recall his profession, didn't know where he lived. All memory of his physical life was gone. But the memory of heaven was intact. Every light, every note, every motion, every glance from the girl on the butterfly, it all felt as though it had just happened. That very morning. So how could a man, whose entire neocortex, the center of memory and language, had shut down completely, still retain clear, detailed memories of the other side? That is where science fails to explain. Some doctors called it hallucination. Others stayed silent, unable to refute it. As for Eben, he began writing it all down, not in the language of medicine, but with words that his heart still remembered. And then came a twist. 1 week after waking up, Eben was shown an old photograph. A girl. He pointed at the picture and whispered, overwhelmed, "That's her. She was there with me." His wife burst into tears. It was his biological sister, who had died when he was a child. Someone he had never met in life. When Eben Alexander woke up, the world called it a medical miracle. But to him, it wasn't a miracle. It was proof. Proof that consciousness does not reside in the brain. Proof that we do not cease to exist when the heart stops beating. And proof that death is not the end. Eben began documenting everything. Every image, every sound, every sensation from the other side. He didn't write as a doctor. He wrote as someone who had just returned from beyond the light. In 2012, he published his book, Proof of Heaven. It became an instant phenomenon. The New York Times kept it on the bestseller list for 35 weeks. But with that came a wave of criticism from the scientific community. Some former colleagues dismissed it. They said, he was just dreaming. It was the hallucination of a dying brain. Eben replied, I know, with certainty, my brain was incapable of creating what I experienced. My cortex was non-functional. I checked the data, and the entire medical team confirmed it. Biologically, there was no capacity left to create images, no way to produce sound, no mechanism for emotion, no ability to form new memories. Yet he remembered it all. Eben emphasized, if what I experienced was just a dream, then it was the most profound, orderly, loving dream I've ever had, and more importantly, it wasn't just me. Millions around the world who have had near-death experiences report the exact same things. So why do most near-death accounts follow the same pattern? The light, the warmth, the feeling of unconditional love, the reunion with lost loved ones, and the deep resistance to coming back. Even some neuroscientists have begun to open up. They're starting to ask if consciousness can continue when the brain stops working. Then is it possible that we are more than just flesh? And that is where science is no longer enough. We need something wider, something deeper, and something more human. During that coma, Eben didn't just see another world. He also received a message, not from a God with a form, not from a winged angel, but from the consciousness of the universe, a presence that loves for no reason at all. The message was simple, yet Eben believes it holds the key to healing all the wounds humanity carries. You are loved. You are always safe. Nothing you do can ever take that love away. At first, it may sound too simple, but think about it. Have you ever lived a single day fully believing that you don't need to do anything to be worthy of love, that you don't need to try harder, fix yourself, or be perfect, just to be completely accepted? Eben knew the love he felt in that world was unlike any love he had ever known. It had no conditions, no limits, no if only. It was simply the pure presence of love, and it wrapped around him like early spring sunlight after a long, gray winter. When he awoke, he brought that message back, not to prove anything, but to remind us we are never truly alone. Whether you are lying in a hospital bed or sinking in your darkest despair, your soul is still being loved. Have you ever felt that kind of love? Not from another person, but from something greater, something without a form. And yet, you can feel it when your heart finally becomes still. For Eben, this is no longer just a strange experience. It is a truth. He wants to pass on to the world, and he believes if even one person remembers it, the world becomes just a little less afraid. Eben Alexander came back, but he was no longer the same man. Before, he was a doctor, a man who believed that every experience could be measured by chemistry, brainwaves, and MRI scans. But after that journey, he no longer measured life in the same way. He began to see people as souls temporarily wearing bodies, souls who had forgotten where they came from, souls who were suffering simply because they forgot they were loved. How would you live differently if you knew this with certainty? That no mistake you've ever made is big enough to make you forgotten. That no wound you carry makes your soul any less worthy of the light. And that no moment of loneliness means you are truly alone. Eben said, "What changed me wasn't the scenery, or the music, or even the beings of light. It was the feeling that I have always belonged to something greater, and that I was never separated from it, not even for a second." And if he could come back just to say one thing, perhaps it would be this: you don't have to die to remember who you are. You just need to start listening to your heart again. So now, you've walked through the journey of Dr. Eben Alexander, a man who once believed only in absolute science, but who saw something no medical device could ever measure. In this video, you witnessed a completely non-functional brain that still remembered a heavenly realm, a soul leaving the body, not with fear, but with light, and a message so simple, yet powerful enough to change a life. You are loved. Even when you forget that, this is not just the story of a doctor. It might also be a memory buried deep inside of you, a memory of a place you once knew, once belonged to, and once promised never to forget. If this video touched something within you, leave the letter Q below as a sign that you are returning to your own great question. And if you'd like the next video to go even deeper, comment with the letter E so I can make it better for you. In the next video, I will tell you about the moment Eben discovered who the woman on the butterfly truly was, and why that moment made him weep like a child, right there in the hospital. Want to hear more? Comment next below. You are not alone. You have never been alone, and you will always be guided. See you on the other side of the next story.